Okay, the one I'm talking to you about today is a wild one, and I felt like it was kind of like a Lifetime movie when I first heard about it. And it might very well be one, or it definitely will be one in the future, but it kind of just goes to show the level of like unhinged that people become. Okay, I want you to just imagine this for a moment. Okay, imagine that your friend suddenly disappears. Meanwhile, their spouse has a dozen different stories about where they went, who they were with, what happened. Then boom, all of a sudden, a huge piece of evidence, a clue, turns everything about the case upside down. And guys, there's a twist at the end of this that I bet none of you are ready for. I know that I wasn't. It is one of those like roller coaster cases. So, let me just shut up. I'm going to get right into it and buckle up because we've got a lot of twists and turns ahead. So in November of 2015, Michael Mike Shaver disappeared without a trace. One moment he was at home with his wife, Lori, and with their two kids, Isabel and Aiden. But then the next he was just gone. Now Lori says his disappearance happened after yet again another argument between the two of them, which these arguments were happening pretty frequently. It was apparently like their marriage was just unraveling. It was this long string of arguments and then boom, this one happened. And in the heat of all of it, Mike just walked out of their Claremont, Florida home. Just walked out and never looked back. And this was the last time that Lori, Isabel, and Aiden would ever see him or ever hear from him ever again. Now, at first, Lori thought that Mike would come back. I mean, maybe not right away, but eventually. But as the weeks dragged into months, the reality began to settle in. Mike was gone for good. So Lori did the only thing that she could do. She began to move on. She wanted to continue and live her life. But starting over for her wasn't really easy because by 2015, Lori and Mike were both in their mid-30s. They had been together for over 2 decades also. So starting over after 20 years, I mean, not an easy feat. Their relationship had begun, long before marriage and children had even entered the picture as well. I mean, so the history that they shared also kind of made Mike's sudden disappearance just even more difficult to comprehend. Now Lori was suddenly in a position where she was a single mother trying to navigate that, trying to navigate raising her two kids on her own, but keeping things together and emotionally intact for them as well. So she did what she could to keep things as normal as possible, even when neighborhood chatter and rumors and whispers started to add up. Because to those who knew Mike, something about his disappearance just was not adding up. It wasn't making sense. I mean, a husband doesn't just vanish into thin air, right? A father doesn't just walk away from his kids without a trace. I mean, usually, unless they're a full-on deadbeat. Yet that's exactly what seemed to happen here. Now let's go back a little bit and talk about how Mike and Lori met and what their upbringings were, because I feel like you need to have a full picture of these two people before we get into, like, what went on. So, their story began in upstate New York, where they both spent their childhoods. Mike was the third of 4 kids. He was raised by a single mother, and from a very early age he just was super fascinated with figuring out how things worked. I mean, he loved tinkering, fixing and building, whether it was old radios, broken appliances, discarded bicycles. He would just collect what a lot of people considered junk, and then he would take it all apart and put it all back together again. And the two of them, Lori and Mike, first met in middle school. That's how far back they go. From the moment that they crossed paths, something just clicked between them. So eventually their friendship evolved into a crush. Then the crush evolved into dating. Then dating went into a serious relationship. Serious relationship went into engagement. Engagement went into marriage. I mean, over the course of many, many years. They married shortly after their high school graduation, and then they started building their life together. Mike had dreams of becoming a pilot and really wanted to pursue this commercial flying license. Eventually, he even secured a job at Piedmont Airlines. Then, in his spare time, he worked on competitive racing airplanes, which I didn't even know that was a thing, but the more you know, right? So as their relationship grew, Lori also was working and she built a career in the insurance industry, all while Mike was pursuing his passion with aviation. And their lives were a little bit all over the place, right? Because his job was in the commercial airline industry. It took him from city to city, state to state. I mean, all over the place, constantly on the move, even international occasionally. So all of this back and forth in this travel, this meant frequently relocating their small but growing family. But then with the arrival of their two children, Isabel and Aiden, they started rethinking the whole lifestyle. It was difficult to manage. It was a lot. I mean, moving from place to place is one thing when it's just you and your partner. But now when you have kids in the mix who you want to establish a routine, give them roots, makes things more challenging, right? So Mike and Lori decided to set out on their search for the perfect home that they could raise their family in. And eventually they found it. A spacious, beautiful property in Claremont, Florida. A very quiet and rural area just outside of Orlando. And it was everything that they had hoped for. It was 5 acres of land, plenty of space for the kids to run around, even room for animals. So they really embraced this country lifestyle. I mean, so much so that they even added ducks and chickens to their home. I mean, they loved this life. But now having this settled home balance and home life, it really sparked something in Mike. He was now craving that same kind of, what I don't know what you call it, like not roots, but like that same kind of stability in his work life as well. He loved aviation, but he didn't love the long hours. He didn't love the constant travel that was draining. And more than anything, he just hated being away from his family for so long. So over time he found himself really craving a change, something that would, you know, keep him closer to home, keep him grounded. And then the absolute perfect opportunity came along because he landed a job as a mechanic at Disney World. He was working on the Montreals, which are the things that like transport guests all around the resort. You've probably seen them. And for somebody who loved fixing things ever since he was a kid, this now felt like a dream come true. He was going to be helping them as a mechanic. So like a little bit of engineering, I suppose. It's also at, Disney World, the happiest place on earth. And if you love doing that as a kid, I mean, it just kind of feels serendipitous, right? So to the outside world, Mike and Lori had built this life that so many people would envy. I mean, high school sweethearts, 2 kids, this beautiful home with plenty of space to have animals, to grow food, to do all these things, 2 careers that provided stability. I mean, truly what everybody would hope for one day, right? But, as we know, the truth isn't always what it seems from the outside. And behind closed doors, their relationship was far from perfect. Over the years, tensions between the two of them started escalating. So what may have started as a typical marital spat or argument, it started to grow into something far more toxic and dangerous. Their marriage was marked by these heated arguments, these accusations, and even at times violence. So much so that Lori confided in her friends that Mike was physically abusive to her. Not only would he hit her allegedly, but he would even lock her inside a closet for hours at a time. Nobody ever witnessed these alleged incidents, but her friends believed her. They were convinced that she was a victim of domestic. However, Mike's close friends saw the situation very differently. They believed that Lori was the aggressor, that she was the one frequently attacking him because on at least one occasion, Mike apparently showed up to work, and he had visible bruises on his face. When his co-workers asked him what had happened, he admitted to them that Lori hit him. They urged him to go to the police because they were obviously really concerned for his well-being, also for the kids living in a toxic household like that. But Mike just dismissed the idea. He told them, "No, it's not worth the hassle of involving the police or going through any sort of legal battle. I'm just, it's a toxic marriage. I'm just going to deal with it. This is just the way that life is now." And you might be wondering, okay, well, why did their relationship go so south? They were high school sweethearts. Seems like they had everything. What happened? Well, it had gone bad for a lot of different reasons. I mean, for example, Mike and Lori were accusing each other of infidelity. Both of them against each other. Each suspected the other of being unfaithful. And these suspicions ended up leading to explosive arguments. Now, as I've hinted at, their arguments, they weren't just verbal. They often got physical. And on multiple occasions, both Lori and Mike allegedly escalated from the physical violence aspect of it to threatening each other with guns during their arguments. I mean, these got especially intense. By September 2014, one fight escalated to a particularly dangerous level too. Because one night, a pretty bad argument erupted right after Lori supposedly discovered very suspicious text messages on Mike's phone. It's unclear what they said, and some sources say that Lori only found a woman's number on his phone, not these incriminating text messages, but whatever it was that she found, it was enough for Lori to spark this massive confrontation. And this fight got really intense, so much so that it prompted Lori to call 911. When she called, she told the operator that although they have had arguments in the past, this is the first time that it got physical, and that there was actual violence involved. But she claimed that Mike grabbed her and that he attacked her. Yet, when the police arrived, Mike told a completely different story, just like they were telling their friends two different stories. And according to Mike, Lori had been the one to escalate the situation to physical violence, not him. He said that she was furious over these text messages, and that in a fit of rage, she went and grabbed a gun, and not only threatened to use the gun and kill him, but said that she was going to turn the gun on herself as well. Now, both of them had apparently been drinking that night, and fearing that she might act on these threats, Mike ended up taking her car keys and prevented her from leaving. Although to me personally, I don't really know how that would stop the threat, or even like yield it or curb it at all, because you would kind of, not that she should drink and drive, obviously, but you should want her out of the house so that she doesn't use the weapon in my mind. But anyways, regardless, he took her keys, and that only made matters worse, because then allegedly Lori lunged at him again with the gun still in her hand. From there, a struggle between the two of them ensued. And during this physical little altercation, Mike said that Lori struck him over the head with the gun, almost like pistol whipping him, leaving this really deep and bloody gash. Lori, however, claimed that, no, I only hit Mike's hand, and that caused him to then accidentally strike himself in the head. I didn't do that. But whatever happened, a neighbor who saw the aftermath of the fight took photos of Mike's injuries, and the images showed a deep wound with significant bleeding, an injury that didn't look casual or accidental or even self-inflicted. Meanwhile, Lori appeared relatively unharmed. Now, despite all of that, when the officers interviewed Mike, he admitted that he had grabbed Lori, not in an attempt to hurt her, but rather to restrain her when she was trying to reach for the gun. However, that admission, in and of itself, was enough for the police to arrest him on domestic charges. He admitted to touching her, so he was arrested. Mike ultimately accepted a plea deal which allowed him to enter a 12-month pretrial intervention program. However, he ended up completing the program in 6 months instead of 12, and then ultimately the charges were dropped. Still, though, the judge ended up issuing a no-contact order between him and Lori, forcing Mike to move out of their shared home. So, with nowhere else to go, Mike took up residence in an airplane hangar. Now, many sources said that the airplane hangar was at his work, but as far as I know, there isn't an airplane hangar at Disney World. I mean, maybe I'm missing something. I did do some research, but I couldn't really find a definitive answer. Now, as I mentioned before, Mike did compete on a competitive flying team. So because of that, other sources say that he was staying at his team's hangar, which also makes a little bit more sense to me. But whatever the case, he ended up living there for a while, sleeping among the planes, using the locker room showers to bathe, eating microwave meals in the break room, and just getting by. Eventually, though, Mike ended up moving back home. And unfortunately, this kind of became a pattern in their marriage. I mean, Lori would kick him out. He'd live in the hangar for a while. He'd return. They'd make up. And then it was just a cycle ongoing. It was always the same thing. And during the periods where Mike was not living at the home when she kicked him out when he was in the hangar, rumors started swirling that Lori was seeing other men during those times. Friends and neighbors would tell Mike about these frequent visitors. And Mike even went so far as to fly over their house in a plane just to see if there were unfamiliar cars parked in the driveway. Which I got to say, maybe because I don't have a plane at my disposal. But I will say in my day, in my toxic relationships, I've done drive-bys to see if other cars are over at the house, or like if they're dating other girls, which I know that sounds totally psychotic and like crazy girl behavior. But look, in my 20s, I was a stage drive cleaner. I'll just say it like it is. You guys are my friends here. I'm going to tell you like it is. And I would definitely do drive-bys. Taking a plane now and flying a plane overhead, that kind of goes next level, but, you know, I can't say I wouldn't do it if I had a plane when I was 21 years old. Maybe I would. Although he was, of course, much older, but you get what I'm saying. So he flies over, seeing if there's any unfamiliar cars, and ultimately he confronted Lori about the rumors. And when he did, Lori made her stance crystal clear. She was allowed to see other men while they were separated, but Mike was not allowed to see other women, and she even warned him that if he did, he would never be allowed to see their kids again. Which I don't know how you can really have that argument and think that you have any merit in that. Like, how are you going to say, I can see other men, but you can't see other women? Like, that feels a little hypocritical. That doesn't really track, right? Well, turns out in the spring in 2015, during one of their many separations, Mike did begin dating a co-worker named Kendall. And when Lori found out about that relationship, she was furious. She even tracked down Kendall's Facebook page and began sending her just all of these threatening messages one after another, saying, I'm going to expose you as a homewrecker. You better not mess with me. Back off my husband. Just like truly going at this girl. She even went so far as to report their relationship to Disney's HR department, hoping to get Kendall in trouble at work for, you know, what is that? Fraternirization. And I don't know if he was her boss or what it was, but she was like pulling out all the stops. And she didn't stop there. She took it next level. She even took photos from Kendall's personal Facebook page, pictures that in Lori's mind she deemed as looking inappropriate. And she submitted those photos to Disney's HR department as well, arguing, you know, Kendall's not the type of person that you would want representing your brand. She shouldn't work at Disney. She's not innocent. She's not wholesome. Take a look at these pictures. Which I will say Disney does take their employees and their reputation, I guess you would say, very seriously. I had a friend who worked at Disney, not even like at the park, but worked in downtown Disney at a restaurant. And they are so strict. I'm sure you've heard of Disney fingers. If you haven't, it basically means you're not allowed to use like your single index finger to point to anything. Like if somebody's like, hey, where's the bathroom? You can't say, oh, over there. The rule is you always have to use two fingers. That's like the polite way. Guys, I know that probably sounded way worse than I meant it, but get your minds out of the gutter. But you have to say like, no, it's over this way or this way. Kind of how Chick-fil-A has to say, what do they say? My pleasure to everything that if you say thank you or whatever. So, I kind of get where she was trying to go with this, but I also don't know that it's going to hold much water, but whatever. And her harassment didn't just stop there with Disney. Lori also managed to find Kendall's grandmother's phone number. Then in the middle of the night, she called her grandmother at 3 a.m., demanding to know where Kendall lived. Basically being like, Grandma, tell me where Kendall lives. I need to know her address. Like fully unhinged, right? There was even one time when Mike apparently called Kendall and told her she needed to park in a different parking lot than usual for work, because Lori was driving over. She was on her way to Disney, and she had a gun, and he was worried that she was going to do something crazy to Kendall, which at that point, I think you got to call it, and you just got to divorce. There's no way to save a marriage like that in my opinion. Again, not that I advocate for divorce, but come on. If you're worried somebody's going to commit murder, maybe you don't stay with that person. And while nothing significant came of Laura's threats, the relentless harassment did take its toll. And by May of 2015, Kendall had enough. And she ended her relationship with Mike. The constant threats and the interference from Lori had just become way too much to handle. But once again, history repeated itself. And following this breakup, Mike moved right back into the home with Lori and his 2 kids and tried to make their marriage work. And their toxic relationship didn't just affect the 2 of them, and I would imagine their children too. It also affected their extended friends and family. Over time, he just became increasingly distant from his loved ones. His family, who lived out of state, made several attempts to come visit him, but time and time again, the plans would just fall through. At the last minute, Mike would just call them and say, "You know, it's not a good time right now, you can visit another time." All was really citing Lori as the main reason behind it, saying she insisted that they needed to focus on their marriage, and these family visits would just only be a distraction. So if he really was trying to contact her, he would have been able to. And the odd behavior didn't just stop at text messages. His Facebook activity also started taking a drastic turn. Previously, his posts were filled with photos of himself, his friends, the planes that he worked on, some family shots here and there. But now his timeline was flooded with these random memes, different posts that seemed just totally disconnected from his usual personality. And then things got even stranger when his Facebook profile picture just suddenly changed from a personal photo of him to a random image of this group of people at a bar where Mike wasn't even in it. His friend Scott noticed the switch and immediately tried to find Mike in the photo, but he realized he wasn't even in it at all, not even in the background. So super confused, he decided to take a closer look and do a reverse Google image search on the picture. And to his shock, he discovered that the photo wasn't even original. It was a stock image that was used by a Bloody Mary company, like a bar promotion company or I guess rather a liquor promotion company. Meanwhile, everybody else still surrounding Lori was just growing increasingly concerned about his sudden disappearance, because she still seemed completely unfazed by the situation. Her lack of worry or urgency was just extremely unsettling, especially considering the circumstances, because in fact, Lori seemed to move on remarkably quickly. Just about a month after Mike left, she met a man named Jeremy Townsend at a park. Jeremy was married, but he still pursued Lori like the garbage human that he is, and she didn't seem to mind. Lori told him she had recently become single and explained that her husband, had abruptly left her and her children behind, though she didn't go into too much detail. But she seemed to be more than ready to embrace this new relationship. And it didn't take long for Lori to become infatuated with Jeremy. In fact, less than a month into their relationship, Lori showed just how serious she was about this relationship. She tattooed Jeremy's nickname, Jay, right above her crotch. Which, look, even a tattoo of somebody's name on the arm is a lot for only being with somebody for a month. Tattooing it right above your, private area, that's next level. That is dedication. But also, I will just say, to each their own. I personally will not ever get somebody's name tattooed on me. I think it's the kiss of death. But, go Lori, I guess. Now she's obviously taking this relationship very seriously and very committed to this guy. Meanwhile, he initially was under the impression that this relationship with her was purely casual, purely sexual. He was married after all. So now he was becoming way overwhelmed by Lori's stage 5 clinger intense attachment to him. And at this point, she was constantly bombarding him with text messages, also questioning him about his marriage, asking why he was still wearing his wedding ring, why he hasn't divorced his wife yet, whether or not he was in love with her. the constant just harassment of questions and emotional demands. It was a lot for Jeremy to handle, and it definitely was not what he thought he signed up for. But then the situation took another unexpected turn when Jeremy's wife, Vanessa, received a very bizarre delivery at her job. She received this oversized bouquet of flowers that also had a card with it. And on the card, it read, "Roses are red. Violets are blue. My wife is a whore. Your husband is too. Sorry about this. Check your Facebook messages. We need to talk, Mike." So completely confused and also rightfully so a little freaked out, Vanessa checked her Facebook messages. And, when she did, she found a series of hundreds of messages from Mike. In these messages, he shared details about Jeremy and Lori's affair. He included screenshots of their text message exchanges. He even included the inappropriate nude photos that they had sent one another. So Vanessa was understandably very upset, and she confronted her husband Jeremy about this, which he didn't try to deny it. Instead, he admitted to this affair, and he immediately ended things with Lori. He assured Vanessa that he was committed to working on their marriage. If she would just give him another chance, he would never see Lori again. Nothing like this would ever happen. It's officially over. Now you can imagine Lori was hurt. She was frustrated, and she really tried to win Jeremy back, but her efforts were useless. He wanted to make his marriage work. He was done with her, and Lori didn't really stay that upset for very long. Instead, she quickly set her sights on somebody new, a guy named Travis Filmer, who also happened to be a local church leader that she met through mutual friends. Their chemistry was undeniable, and they quickly grew close with one another. Travis, who had always wanted a family, was drawn to Lori's bond with her kids, which he just found incredibly attractive. I mean, here she was left by her husband, embracing motherhood on her own. Then, by the beginning of 2016, Lori hosted a bonfire party, where she and Travis became even closer. This really was the spark of the beginning of their relationship. And as they continued seeing each other, she assured Travis that her marriage with Mike was officially over, that they were completely officially divorced, that Mike was no longer involved in their children's lives, that he wasn't paying child support, that she was fully independent and on her own. Which meanwhile, Mike's friends and family couldn't help but notice how serious Lori and Travis's relationship was now becoming. And understandably, they started asking her about it because their curiosity about Mike, it hadn't faded. At this point, it had been almost a year since anybody had seen him or talked to him, and they still had no clue where he was or what he was doing. But Lori told them, "No, me and Mike are divorced. I've gone to court for it. We're done." Like he left. I'm done. I'm moving on with my life. However, I will say she did claim that she never actually saw Mike at the divorce hearing. She said he didn't want to be there. So they stayed in separate rooms during the entire proceeding of it, and they were divorced, and it all worked out. But again, the whole story just seemed a little bit odd. Yet Lori seemed confident in this story. So they didn't question her any further. And she really seemed to quickly embrace this new reality of hers. She was posting updates on social media, photos, as if nothing ever happened. She was sharing photos of herself and Travis enjoying time together. She shared photos of her kids. She was even posting some photos of various projects she was working on around her house, particularly some remodeling. One specific detail was pouring a concrete pad for a fire pit in the backyard. And she and Travis even etched their initials into this cement, officially finishing the project. It was almost as if she was carrying on like everything was perfectly normal without a care in the world. And to any outsider, it would have seemed like nothing strange had happened at all. Then, on December 31st, 2016, Lori and Travis took the next step in their relationship. They got married in a small, intimate ceremony in Lori's backyard. And this event was very close-knit. Only a couple close family and friends were in attendance, and everything was going really smoothly. It seemed like a very happy, very joyful, loving occasion. But then, out of nowhere, Lori had an unexpected emotional breakdown. She locked herself in the bathroom with a gun, threatening to take her own life. And the situation came completely out of left field. Everybody around her was just stunned, kind of unsure of how to react. It wasn't like the usual, pre-wedding nerves or jitters that people sometimes experience. This was obviously far more intense, and why? Fortunately, a family member was able to talk to Lori and calm her down, and kind of bring her back, down to reality. So the wedding continued as planned. They got married. She seemed to snap back to her cheerful self. She was going through the motions of enjoying the wedding, and there was no sign that a breakdown had even happened. And that in and of itself kind of left people feeling a little bit unsettled, right? Like, how do you go from one extreme to the other, but nobody really knew how to make sense of it. It was just a bizarre moment that didn't really seem to fit in with the life that Lori had been portraying to the world. But Lori moved on. She and Travis were married. They continued their relationship, and they even had 2 kids together, making Lori now a mom of 4. And by mid-2017, the mystery of Mike's whereabouts had deepened, but still nobody had heard a word from him. Some people, like close friends and family, would receive an occasional text from him, saying he was okay, that he was just checking in, but that was pretty much it. No calls, no details about his life, basically nothing. Lori, however, started building this whole new narrative about his absence, because now she was saying he didn't vanish, and he didn't leave her and go off on his own, but he's actually stalking her. He's following her everywhere that she goes. She even claimed that she had to call the police because she spotted him tailing her while she was driving. And according to Lori, when the police arrived on the scene to investigate, they even discovered that Mike had placed tracking devices on her car. And she claimed that there were so many hidden tracking devices that the police had to take the car to the station so that they could remove all of them. It took him 2 weeks to find all of them and to get rid of everything. I mean, he was stalking her to the 1/1,000,000th degree. Yet despite what happened, she, for whatever reason, didn't file an official police report for stalking or for harassment. Instead, she just continued to confide in her friends about it, talking about this ongoing surveillance, stalking, but never really wanting to take legal action to address it. And there was kind of a strange mix with this that had her friends and family's curiosity piqued. I mean, she was raising red flags for anybody who was close to her because on one hand, she was portraying herself as a victim of Mike's stalking and obsession. Yet she also wasn't willing to take any legal steps to protect herself or protect her children. If she was truly scared, why wouldn't she act on it? So by 2018, Mike's family and friends had reached their breaking point. Something was clearly wrong, and the fact that nobody had heard from him in now over 2 years, it was becoming harder to ignore. For people who knew Mike well, it just didn't add up. They couldn't reconcile the idea that he would just voluntarily cut off all contact, especially with his children. While it was possible that, he might severize with Lori, the one constant in his life was his kids. Mike had always been a dedicated father, and everybody was certain that even if he had tried to distance himself from Lori, he definitely would not have abandoned his children. So by February of 2018, his friend Scott, the same one who noticed that weird Facebook profile change, the picture to, the stock photo of the group from the Bloody Mary site, he knew that he just could not ignore this nagging feeling in his gut anymore. He knew something was wrong, so he decided that he was going to take action. I mean, he hadn't heard from his friend in over 2 years, so he requested that the police perform a welfare check on Mike at Lori's house. And he wasn't really sure what to expect, but he knew that there was just something between all the stories that wasn't adding up. When law enforcement arrived, Lori appeared calm and very cooperative, answering all their questions without any hesitation. She explained how and when Mike had left. She stuck to her story that he had simply just walked away from their life, back in 2015. She allowed the police to come in to search through the house. I mean, just seemingly unbothered by this intrusion, not worried at all. But then once the officers made their way through the house and into the backyard, everything changed because right there near the fire pit that remember Lori had so enthusiastically been posting about on social media, the police found an unusual depression in the cement slab. This area was about 6 by 9 ft in size, and the indention was a few inches deep, and suspiciously this indention was shaped like a human body. So this discovery immediately raised concerns among the officers, and they asked Lori like, "Hey, we're going to come back this evening with search dogs. Is that okay?" And up until that moment, Lori had been warm, chatty, accommodating. But when it came to the backyard, her demeanor drastically shifted. Gone was the friendly, cooperative woman. Suddenly, she was now cold, guarded, and angry. So, she ordered these officers off her property, saying, "I'm not allowing any dogs in unless you have a warrant. Get out, get off my property and beat it. If you have any questions, talk to my lawyer." So this was the kind of reaction that made the investigators pause a little bit, because if she really had nothing to hide, why the sudden change? Why was she totally fine and open and willing when they were inside the house, and now turn into this mean guarded person the second they were in the backyard? And they knew something was up. So they got their warrant, and on March 9th, nearly a month after their very unsettling first visit, the investigators returned to Lori's property. And this time, they didn't come empty-handed. They brought excavation tools, cadaver dogs, and they just had this growing sense that something was very, very wrong. It didn't take long. As soon as the dogs were released into the yard, one of them made a beeline for that fire pit, circling it again and again, signaling that something below the surface demanded their attention. So, a team of officers got to work, digging through this thick concrete slab, and within a few hours, their efforts paid off. They saw the first sign of human remains, specifically a partially exposed arm. And from there, the team just continued to dig. Once they were done digging, they found an entire body wrapped in a sheet and secured very tightly with a tarp. It was discovered approximately 3 feet underground, and at this point, it was basically just a skeleton wearing only socks and underwear. It was clear that these remains had been there for months, possibly even years. Now, while this search was going on, it kind of is reminiscent of Chad Dell. She just stayed inside the house, just quietly watching as everything was unfolding. But then the moment that the body was uncovered, she got into her car, and she took off. Investigators kept working, but her exit didn't go unnoticed. I mean, if anything, it only raised more questions about what she knew, right? And what she might have been trying to avoid. So the body was carefully removed, and it was sent for further examination. And using DNA from Mike's father, the authorities confirmed in 2018 that these remains belonged to Mike. The timeline of his death was narrowed down to late 2015, a date that of course matched the last time that anybody had seen him or heard from him. And eventually, an autopsy revealed the shocking truth behind Mike's death. He had been shot in the head with a .38 caliber handgun. Coincidentally, this was the same type of gun that Lori kept in her nightstand and had used to threaten Mike in the past. So this discovery confirmed what all of Mike's friends and family had feared. Mike had not just walked out on his life, walked out on his children. He had been murdered. And with each new piece of evidence, they were increasingly convinced that Lori was the one responsible for his death. But proving it, that was going to be a whole different challenge. Because while the truth was finally starting to surface, Lori was not going to go down without a fight. And the investigation into Mike's death, it was only the beginning. Because remember, I told you there was a twist in this at the end that nobody, even myself, saw coming. So after the discovery of Mike's remains, police issued a second warrant, a few weeks later, so that they could examine the property further. Investigators used specialized lighting to detect bloodstains inside the home, and they found evidence of a trail of blood that stretched all the way from the dining room all the way to the back porch. Among the bloodstains, They also found multiple hair follicles. The blood in the hair was sent away for testing, and test results later showed the presence of mixed DNA Lori and an unidentified male. Now, unfortunately, a direct match would never be found for either. So, while it couldn't be directly linked to Mike, he also couldn't be ruled out. So the investigation that followed the discovery of Mike's body started to paint a picture. Not only that Lori had potentially murdered Mike, but that she lived with this secret for years, and also lived with his body in her backyard for years. Investigators found that the last call that Mike's cell phone made was on November 7, 2015, the last day that anyone ever saw him. His bank accounts also told a very troubling story, because by late 2015, his bank activity just came to a halt. No ATM withdrawals, no credit card purchases, no signs of him living anywhere, nothing. However, somebody had been using his accounts for a short while after November 7th, and all of that evidence pointed directly to Lori being the one using the accounts. Records showed that on November 19th and 23rd, somebody used Mike's debit card to go buy clothes and also buy lingerie online. The purchases weren't sent to Georgia, where, remember, Lori claimed Mike had moved, but instead it was shipped to her home in Florida under her name. And in the weeks that followed, somebody completely drained Mike's account, which it was mostly online transactions. And that was kind of also out of character for Mike because he was more of like an in-person kind of shopper, not a big online shopper. But by that December, his account was overdrafted and then never used again. Detectives also uncovered other alarming financial discrepancies, including the fact that those flowers that were sent to Vanessa, remember Jeremy's wife, they were purchased using Lori's personal debit card. Checks addressed to Mike also continued arriving at the house, and they were endorsed and deposited right into an account that Lori controlled. Meanwhile, all of his bills went unpaid. His passport expired. A loan was taken out in his name and never repaid. I mean, come on. It's pretty clear what happened here, right? But then beyond just this financial trail, the investigators uncovered a mountain of digital evidence. All those messages that appeared to come from Mike, the text messages, the Facebook posts, all of it, they were tracked back to Lori's IP address. So for Mike's friends and family, it confirmed what they had suspected all along. The messages didn't sound like him because they weren't from him. Someone had been impersonating Mike. And again, all the signs pointed directly to Lori. But that wasn't all. One of Mike's close friends came forward with text messages that he had received from Mike shortly before he disappeared. And in these texts, Mike shared something chilling. He said Lori was after his life insurance money, and he admitted that he was scared she might kill him for it. Even more disturbing, he told his friend that if anything ever happened to him, Lori would cover it up.